This is America, and this is Santa Monica College, where thousands of Californians go to study and prepare for the workforce. With tuition rates continuing to rise across the U.S., many Americans are turning to community colleges like this one, which cost less than the big universities. But is the traditional pathway to higher education still worth it in 2026, or are we witnessing a big change in the educational landscape? I'll be back with more on that later, but first, let's turn it over to the Washington studio.
John Hendren, thank you. Now, for generations, the American university was viewed as the ultimate ticket to the middle class and a global gold standard for education. But today, that foundation is under strain. Demographic declines, sky-high tuition fees, and the rise of artificial intelligence are disrupting entry-level jobs, and higher education is under fire. The looming permanent closure of Massachusetts Hampshire College underscored a sobering reality. Hundreds of other regional institutions could follow. So is higher education in crisis, or is it simply being forced to adapt? Clearly, the success of the nation's young people is at the forefront of the president's mind.
In total, American society pours more than $1 trillion a year into public education systems. But instead of being at the top of the list, we are literally right smack, guess what, at the bottom.
But changing economics and changing expectations are leading many young people to rethink what success looks like and whether college is the only path to get there. John Hendren, how's this from California?
At American universities, tuition is rising at astronomical rates, just as enrollment is on a steady decline. For small universities and students alike, that is a recipe for an uncertain future. To curb soaring university costs, many American students are attending less expensive community colleges, now seeing rising enrollment. Matt Cortez says he's saving $80,000 by attending Santa Monica College for the first 2 years.
I believe if you don't really get a scholarship, it can really outweigh the benefits of going.
The average annual cost of university in the United States for the academic year ending in 2026 is nearly $19,000. With room and board, it's over $24,000, the price of a new Toyota Corolla each year. Average yearly tuition at public colleges costs about $10,000. At a private college, $39,000, the price of a fully loaded Mustang Fastback. From 2006 to 2026, the average annual cost of college tuition and fees rose 93%. Those figures have Dominique JJ discussing options with her daughter in high school.
Yeah. My hope is that we'll get a scholarship. So I'm trying not to, I think about the money, but between savings and scholarship, I think I've been anticipating that and also choosing schools that are in our budget.
The unemployment rate for recent college graduates reached 5.7% in late 2025, compared to about 4% for all workers. A report by the U.S. Senate Labor Committee warns that is likely to grow worse, with a tsunami of job losses due to artificial intelligence expected to cost the U.S. more than 100 million positions over the next decade. That could especially be true in fields that were most promising before the AI boom.
You're seeing the employment of recent computer science graduates fall off a cliff from a lot of programs. If you rewind, 4 years ago, what would we tell young people for a secure career, learn to code? And now the opposite of that is true.
That's a big reason Romeo Gallo chose to study healthcare.
I just came down to the conclusion that AI is not gonna replace healthcare workers, so I think it's a safe spot to be in.
Many students are opting out of college entirely. Between 2010 and 2021, 2.7 million fewer students were enrolled in American universities, and those numbers are expected to plunge further. As students weigh whether the cost of college is worth it, some experts warn that with declining birth rates, universities here in the U.S. might be heading off a demographic cliff. But even if they can avoid that, they say, the current rate of rise in tuitions is simply unsustainable. John Hendren, Al Jazeera, Santa Monica, California.
Well, declining enrollment is just one issue causing financial problems for many institutions of higher learning. One new estimate suggests up to a quarter of private colleges are at risk of closing. And as Kristen Salumi reports, some already have.
Hampshire is hardly the first private college to close, but it is one of the most noteworthy. Known for its student-driven curriculum, as well as famous alumni, like documentary filmmaker Ken Burns, the school recently announced that this year would be its last, due to declining enrollment.
Devastated that we weren't able to get more support and funding, and schools like this are dying.
Hampshire is the latest in a trend. Nearly 300 colleges and universities closed between 2008 and 2023. More have merged or been forced to cut staff and curriculum. Declining birth rates in the United States mean fewer college-aged Americans at a time when more and more of them are questioning the value of a high-priced liberal arts education. And that means less income for schools like this one. The new school in New York recently laid off dozens of faculty and staff to balance its budget. Professors, however, accuse administrators of mismanagement.
From the 1970s onward, we have seen less investment from our federal and state governments in our universities. And that's forced our universities and our colleges to make decisions which I think have been really unwise decisions. They've acted more like businesses. They've corporatized themselves. They've pushed the burden of the costs of higher education onto the backs of students.
Another problem is fewer international students. Foreign student enrollment in the 2026 spring semester fell by 20% from the year before. That follows the Trump administration's crackdown on campus protests and even deportation of some students. It also imposed visa restrictions for overseas students and slashed grants and research funding. The end result, a changing landscape and uncertain future for higher education. Kristen Salumi, Al Jazeera, New York.
All right, well, let's drill down into the topic. We're joined by Andre Perry, Senior Fellow and Director of the Center for Community Uplift at the Brookings Institution, and by Jeff Strohl, Research Professor and Director of the Georgetown University Center on Education and the Workforce. A very warm welcome to you both, Jeff and Andre. If I could start with you, Jeff. I mean, looking at the numbers, according to reliable forecasts, we're talking about 1 in 4 private non-profit colleges that could close or merge at the end of the next decade. How did so many institutions find themselves on the precipice of financial ruin?
I think one thing we have to be thinking about is just a historic trend, a slow-moving earthquake, shall we say. And so we've seen increasing tuitions, people starting to worry about being able to pay their debt. So that's caused crisis from one side. We've seen state budgets begin to decline, and so they've pushed more and more of the cost onto the students. And then we have a demographic cliff coming, right? So the American high school class is going to physically go into absolute decline after about 2027. So we have less and less students, and along the way we've had this growing narrative of, is college worth it, right? So, so more students are thinking, should I be going? More institutions are being forced to prove that their programs actually pay for themselves, and then we had been faced with the period of grossly increased tuition costs, which actually has been in decline. So some of that has been changing, but we'll see if it changes quickly enough. And so coming together those pieces, and then plus amenities, right? Go build, pay however many millions of dollars for the best basketball team and the band and all these other pieces. It adds up.
It sounds like a perfect storm, a classic case of, I guess, supply outstripping demand. I mean, many of these institutions, I assume, would have presumed that they would continue to grow, but that model seems to have fallen by the wayside. Andre, when a local college closes its door, like Hampshire College just announced, this isn't just a business failing, isn't it? It's an entire community that's affected.
Yeah, remember that universities and colleges are part of the communities themselves. They hire local workers. They provide services to the overall community. They are essentially the economic and community development agents of those communities. So when a school shuts down, a neighborhood can shut down, which can worsen the situation that we're in today. And it's not just a matter of declining students. Remember, historically speaking, we had much fewer students in higher ed. We had a need to increase that. And as we went from elite to mass, educating more people of color, more low-income students, there required a need to subsidize and support those schools. That support has been waning over the years. And so this is a crisis, so to speak. But there are solutions to this crisis. We've had fewer students before. Yeah. This is about how can we support the students in this new environment.
We'll get into all of that in the course of the discussion, but one of the solutions that some institutions are looking at is simply discounting the average price of tuition fees, on average, apparently by 57%, all, of course, just to get people through the door. Obviously, when it comes to things like healthcare and education, the last thing anyone wants to see is, bargain basement prices. But nevertheless, it's better than paying astronomical prices, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's actually a good move. I mean, for too long, institutions have had a sticker price and a real price. And so they advertise a certain tuition, but once you get through various aid, tuition drops, considerably. So they've really been trying to become much more transparent to attract the students for what the real price would be. And they're also moving towards giving you the admissions before you even apply. Because I've got a 20-year-old who just went through this, and he got through.
I was wondering, whether you have personal experience here. Right.
They're really trying to bring them in, and some of that is bad, though, because it is competition for a limited pool. But as Andre had pointed out, we have historic experience with this, and there's solutions that we can do. And some of it is we can get more in, but we can also get more out. People miss that there's a graduation crisis. So why go to college if it takes 6 years to get a BA, and if you drop out, you don't get any of the benefit?
Andre, looking at the domestic landscape, I mean, the total student loan debt has reportedly climbed to nearly $1.9 trillion. I mean, that's an astronomical, eye-watering sum of money. I mean, for the working class families, who are trying to desperately get their kids through college, I mean, where does the return on investment lie for a 4-year or a 6-year degree?
Well, let's be clear. There is definitely a return on investment for getting a college degree. People worry about going to college and becoming poor. Try not going to college and see what happens. This is a matter, though, about wealth. And what we're seeing now is the low wealth student, that accounts for more than 50% of all student loan debt carried. And so this is a crisis for low wealth students. And what that shows you, there's a structural problem at play, that we ultimately need a subsidized 4-year option for our communities. So many people are actually making a rational choice of going to a public college, going to a community college, where enrollments are increasing in some cases. Black students going to HBCUs. So there's a demand there, and it is about retaining and graduating students. But we also must recognize there's a structural problem in our financing system. We need a public option at the 4-year level.
Understood. Let's pause and hear from the president himself, because let me play you this White House clip where President Trump frames the dismantling of the Department of Education as a long overdue victory. Take a listen.
Today we take a very historic action that was 45 years in the making. In a few moments, I will sign an executive order to begin eliminating the Federal Department of Education once and for all.
Jeff, this seems like a slightly parallel issue, but particularly for an international audience watching this, help us understand the argument here from the president's perspective, and what his ambition to close the Department of Education, what kind of impact that would have on the topic that we're talking about.
Oof. I do not know the full implications of that shutdown, and I think there's so much politics involved, because the movement right now has been moving the civil rights portion of the Department of Education to the Department of Labor. There's an argument, if one wants to follow the rationale out, of reducing the number of programs and having them managed more efficiently. So that, I think, would be the logical argument, but I'm not sure that it will necessarily play out, because basically in the United States we push the responsibility of education more to the states. Right. So the federal government plays a caretaker role in many ways and sets policy, but so much action happens at the state. So what we're seeing here is really pushing responsibility responsibility and funding to the states. And this is where I think we're going to start to see enhanced crisis, because the states haven't even gotten over the Great Recession yet to be able to fund. And they've been pulling back funding. So we're seeing the student have to carry more and more of their bill. So this bringing the departments together, it's not clear if that's going to make the experience of college that much better. And there's also a movement abreast to replace college with skilled trades, send everybody to trade school, where we know that everyone in the country, not everyone, but more and more people need education and training beyond high school. And I call that all college. People often say college, they only mean BA, but I'm talking post-secondary education. So if this movement means we're going to shrink our commitment on education, it's eating the seed corn, because the American model and the world model means we need more and more highly educated workers as the workplace becomes much more complex.
And that's what I'm worried about mostly. Are we reducing our commitment to higher education? Higher education has been attacked on multiple fronts. They've said it's too woke, we say it's too elite, it's not touching Main Street. The reality is what was just stated. We need to be a highly educated populace. We're not moving backwards in that regard. And we need to make it more accessible. Certainly, the Department of Education is essentially a check-cutting operation. For the most part, yes, they get money to the states. They manage higher ed distributions and the like. Those things could be moved. I wouldn't argue against that. But the marketing around closing the Department of Education during a time when society is becoming more advanced in terms of education. And I would argue that we're seeing some of the ripple effects of less education in our populace, the animosity towards other people, the lack of tolerance, that education is just not about getting a job. It's about
the fabric of society.
That's exactly right. And that's what we're losing.
I get it. Jeff, I mean, the share of American high school graduates heading straight to college dropped, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, from 70% to about 61%. You've both already touched upon this, but could you clarify where these young people are going to instead?
Well, that is something that I personally haven't tracked, and it's be my next research report. It's a great question. And so we do have a big divide between men and women going to college. And so we've historically had many more women than men going to college. And I think you could be seeing some of it there. I think people are delaying also a little bit more. So depending on which cohort they're doing. So often it's looking at straight to college rather than any kind of delay, taking a gap year and things like that. So, you know, people are exploring other alternatives of work, but often gap year, things like that.
If they're entering potentially directly the labour market, are there certificates that they can do? Are there trade programs? Is there an explosion in other avenues?
They're trying, but it's not, you know, if you take a look at skilled trades, I did some work recently in Florida and taking a look at high school graduates going into skilled trades. They make, about 40-50% more than other high school graduates. But there's only 4% of the high school class that has a job in those. So it's really hard to find the balance. So yes, there are opportunities. Yes, there are alternative routes, but for good labor policy, we need to have a balanced approach to understand where labor demand is. And we recently did a report that's projecting by 2032 that we're going to fall 4.6 million BAs short of demand, if you look at projected demand, and about 700,000 of what we call middle skills. Certificates themselves can educate to a task, but not many of them provide more a living wage. And so this is going to be very important with the introduction of what's called Workforce Pell, which is reducing the number of hours that somebody needs to get a certificate from a baseline of 600 to 150, which is about 8 weeks, I think, roughly.
Right. Look, let's touch on another issue, because another thing that's kind of impacting all of this is the presence of international students as well. I mean, American higher education has historically relied on international students to fill financial gaps, primarily because they pay full tuition prices. But something's not quite right. Take a look at this data now, because this graph shows international student enrollment in the US broken down by academic year. The first column reflects the impact of COVID when borders were closed. And those figures significantly rebounded the year after the pandemic, but then numbers dropped again and have since continued to decrease. I looked at some of the figures, gentlemen. We're talking about Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Nepali students. Those numbers have plummeted in recent years. I mean, these are youngsters with exceptional academic records, with clear sources of financing. Nevertheless, the lack of their presence here has a huge impact on whether these institutions can stay afloat. Andre, your thoughts?
Clearly, the attitudes of the administration towards countries, and quite frankly, countries that are predominantly people of color, that has impacted the demand on the U.S. side. There is a healthy fear of coming to the U.S. In addition, those other countries are starting to develop their own college options. Yeah. We're not the only game in town, so to speak.
Yeah, Canada's doing rather well.
That's exactly right. So while our foreign policy has dissuaded immigration to this country for high skill and low skill, these other countries are now more competitive in that education market. But ultimately, it's going to hurt this country if we don't get the kind of talent that we're used to getting that has given birth to numbers of innovations, made life on campus better. And so it's a distressing figure.
Yeah, Jeff, I guess if you're a small tuition-dependent regional college, I mean, you must be really worried about your survival given the lack of international students.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because I think you hit it right there, pay full book. And so one of the implications of this that we haven't talked a lot about in the United States is if we're not going to allow people from out of the country to come in, we're going to have to make much larger investments in our own population. So traditionally disadvantaged group, first-time college-going students of color, we need to make a bigger investment because if we don't, we are going to fail in the growth targeting that the United States could have. We're going to fall short. And we leave so many people off the table. About 500,000 students out of every high school class from the top half do not graduate. Right. So we do a really bad job of wasted human talent, and we need to stop that. And
Understood. Jeff, Andre, another massive issue that we must talk about, that's artificial intelligence, because let's talk about why young graduates are struggling to find their footing. The impact of AI on employment becoming more and more clear by the day, because according to data analysed by Stanford's Digital Economy Lab, young people entering the workforce or in the early phases of their careers are being impacted the most. Workers aged 22 to 25 experienced a 6% decline in employment. That's looking at 2022 to 25 in the most AI-exposed occupations, so things like finance, admin, IT. Meanwhile, workers aged 35 to 49 experienced an 8% increase in employment. I mean, Jeff, artificial intelligence rapidly automating a lot of entry-level jobs. If a university degree can no longer guarantee you a safe entry into a career, what's it worth?
Well, this is a great point. One, we keep forgetting people are acting like change has never occurred. So much of what we're seeing right now reminds me of automation. Everybody, the sky is falling. We've got job Armageddon coming at us. One thing that we don't really know is the full impact of AI on the workplace. Much of what we're seeing today with AI is about sectorial investment shifts, which are causing layoffs, rather than AI actually penetrating the workplace and leading to changes. We've got tariffs. We have the reduction in force, and we've got the all the takeaway of federal grants, which have caused a huge spike in supply of professional workers. So the young college graduate is entering into a market. Tech bros want us to believe all of it's AI, but there's a lot of other confounding pieces that are coming at us. So the one piece that we need to remember is one unique feature of the U.S. education model is we combine general and specific education, which means our workers, more than others countries, can learn on the job. Okay. They don't need to go back to school. And so I'm not as fearful of AI as the tech bros might want us to be.
Andre, what about those students that don't come from generational wealth? They potentially come out of college so deeply in debt with no clear route as to how they can build a career.
Yeah, well, I'm a big advocate for canceling student debt, but that's not ultimately a solution. Ultimately, we need a system in which people can go to college the same way they can have a K through 12 option, the same way in general that they can go to a 2-year school for free. or subsidized. We should have those kind of 4-year options, or we're always going to put people who have to take out student loans in greater peril. And in this country, the wealth begets wealth. And the rising price of tuition over those 30 years or so really burden low wealth families. So we need to figure out an acute solution through debt cancellation, cancellation because of public service. We need some remedy for that, but those aren't the ultimate solution. We ultimately need a structural one that allows some type of 4-year degree that is subsidized.
All right, we're coming towards the end of our discussion. I want to put this question to you, Jeff. Let's start with you, because if a student is watching this and they're worried about the stability of their educational institution, what practical steps should they take? We've got about a minute left at the end of the conversation. Your thoughts?
Oh, wow. Really, if they're worried about their institution itself, they really need to look into articulation, how they can transfer their credits. That's going to be the first step for someone who's there. If they're a new graduate coming in, or if they're just entering, then they need to widen their search. So they need to look at institutions that have some indication that they're going to be more stable.
And understand your public options. Understand that the public sector is thriving in a lot of ways. This is a crisis for a sector, a component of higher education, not for the entire higher education landscape.
So my sense is that you both think there is still hope to be found within the institution, but there needs to be some restructuring. Jeff,
there is restructuring has happened if we want it or not, because we have a declining population, and they got to reduce costs.
And we will. Higher ed has a fancy way of reinventing itself. It's older than the country itself. It will survive.
Thanks for leaving us on a hopeful message there. Great to have you both. Well, thanks once again to our guest, Andre Perry, Senior Fellow and Director of the Center for Community Uplift at the Brookings Institution, and Jeff Strohl, Research Professor and Director of the Georgetown University Center on Education and the Workforce. Okay, well, that's all from the team here in Washington. Handing back to John Hendren and Al Jazeera's global headquarters in Doha. See you soon.
And don't forget, you can always catch the latest episode of This Is America Monday through Friday at 18:30 GMT or 11:30 a.m. Pacific if you're here on America's West Coast. Until then, from the whole LA team, bye for now.